Hello, everyone, and welcome to GRUFFtalk, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. So last week, I was talking through some of the great things I've learned over the years from one of the best relationship experts on the planet, Esther Perel. I had the very good fortune to interview her for my first book and have stayed in touch over the years, so that's really great for me. If you've listened to last week's episode, and I really hope you did, where I discussed some of the biggest challenges women have when we're thinking about ourselves as sexual beings and, not just wives or girlfriends or managers or moms or daughters or whatever, but as true sexual beings, I'm sure that you were nodding your head in agreement. It all sounded way, way too familiar, right? It's really hard sometimes to feel sexy or even think about having sex when there's so much going on in the bigger world. We all know what's going on in the bigger world. There's a lot. And probably a lot going on in your own universe. Maybe your kids are still needing your attention. And that seems, just so you know, that seems to be true no matter how old they get. And you might also be spending more time focusing on aging parents. I know that was definitely me during the last few years until my mother passed away in 2021, in July of 2021. A lot of you have heard about that. And, that's why they call us the sandwich generation. There's a really good reason for that. We have things happening above us and behind us and all over, and it takes up our attention and energy. And, when you add in all the stuff we have to take care of and do, and then add that one more layer, the menopause layer, which can contribute to our physical changes. Holy moly, it's a lot. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode yet, I hope you take the time to do so. And definitely consider getting Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity. It's about 10 years old now, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's so highly recommended. Today, we're going to pick up on where we left off last week. I stopped where I did last week because I'm trying really hard to be respectful of your time. And I know that a few weeks ago, the episode with Stacey London, which I really, really enjoyed doing, but it went on for well over an hour. I think it was like an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. I don't know. We just kept going. I hope you all stuck with us and listened to it through the end, but I know that's really asking a lot of you. So we're going to keep this week's episode short and sweet, but full of some real actionable tips that you can use starting today to get your sex life back on track right after this super short break. Okay, we're back. So last week I ended with the question, why don't we have spontaneous sex anymore? Right? Do you remember that? Which Esther Perel thinks is really pretty funny because as she told me and as she wrote in her book, and as I told you last week, you probably never had truly spontaneous sex. Way back when you planned it for hours, maybe days, what you would wear, where you would be, and so on. So just because you've been with your partner for maybe 10, 20, 30 or more years, you should stop planning sex? No. One of my favorite mantras that I learned from Esther well over 10 years ago is this: good sex is planned sex, right? Good sex is planned sex. And also, please remember, sex doesn't necessarily mean intercourse. Good sex is however you define it. Right? So that's where we left off. And now let's forge ahead with a few more roadblocks we often encounter. And then we're going to move on to ways we can create a more erotic life for yourself, most importantly, and for your partner or partners, your choice. A roadblock, a really big roadblock that Esther encounters a great deal is this: well, what if you're really into having sex, but he or she or, your partner isn't? Maybe that person's not into it. So, newsflash, if you're having less sex, chances are it could be the other person and not you, especially if it's a him, I have to say. The reason probably has nothing to do with you either. not your weight, your age, hair, or clothes. With men, very often it's related to a health problem or a medication he may be on for cholesterol, diabetes, or blood pressure. So common in midlife, right? Many of which are known to create some sexual problems. So he should discuss it with his doctor, and your partner's probably over 52, we're assuming. We're assuming, it doesn't have to be. And things might not work the same way they used to for him either. So, hormone shift, not only for us, but also for them. And maybe his fitness levels have declined too. So here's how it often plays out for much of their lives. Listen to this, okay? Men initiate because they already have an erection or feel one coming on, right? But with age, that doesn't happen automatically anymore. And for many men, this can squash their interest in having sex at all. And it also, it can hurt their egos. So everything negative is at play. Your partner's not used to needing stimulation, and it can be troubling when this happens. So he doesn't know what to do except to avoid it. And the woman thinks it's her fault that, he's no longer attracted to her. She's gotten so used to him having a hard-on without her help. And that when she needs to do something to get him to want sex, she can feel a little threatened. This is what Esther has encountered a great deal. It's a situation that's rife with disappointment, suspicion, frustration, and it's just really not good. Again, lack of communication, right? Some very common reactions, unfortunately, include having affairs or avoiding sex or intimacy altogether, or getting a prescription for Viagra. Now, that's not terrible, but again, if you listened to last week, that's more of the kind of the function, not the intimacy that we're really looking for here. The majority of Viagra users, by the way, stop after a few months because it gets the man to function, but it doesn't necessarily give him the desire. It's very interesting. So this creates a need for a more relationship-based approach to sex, which women, we already understand. The man then needs to get used to something that women are comfortable with, cultivating a relationship to build desire and arousal. And the woman has to get used to the fact that this is something the man, he now needs it too. It's a new thing. Once they both do that, couples can have a great sexual life together. And this is one of those times when that crossroads comes into play. Will you as a woman choose the path that would allow you to work with your partner on overcoming this obstacle, this roadblock, this challenge, which will likely include some shifting of previously held feelings, right? Or will you choose to close up the shop, which of course we hope you don't. So another big challenge, and I kind of talked about it before, I touched on it, having aging parents and having children that need you and just having a lot of stuff going on. But, after 50, life really presents a lot of problems. So many things going on that you don't even have room in your brain to think about sex, right? So being over 50 presents more stressful and scary situations, maybe illness or death of loved ones, job loss or job changes, and aging parents. What used to be occasional now seems like the norm. It's heavy, sometimes depressing stuff that can put a real damper on your interest in sex. Of course, it's true. There will be periods in your life when you're dealing with external distractions and you could become less active sexually. It's understandable, but that doesn't mean that you should stop thinking of yourself as a sexual being. You see the difference? Just because you're not having sex because of externals doesn't mean that you shouldn't still think, hey, I am sexy. I am a sexual being. This is really important because you cultivate this erotic space, as Esther calls it, with your partner. So when the opportunity presents itself, you'll see that your sexual energy is alive and well, and you'll be ready. See, that's the point. You always have to kind of think about that. Don't close shop. Don't put it aside. So then the big question is, I've kind of done all of the big major challenges last week and then a few just now. And I want to talk about something that is super important, So talking about this erotic space. So how do you even create an erotic, like what is an erotic space? How do you create an erotic space? How do you find an erotic space? So whether you have kids or not, an erotic space is essential to having an erotic life with your partner or partners. It's not a physical place necessarily, but an emotional spot where the two of you go to get physical. The erotic space is where you come together, not as responsible and productive citizens, adults, parents, caregivers, children, friends, but as lovers. It's a space where sex can happen if that's what you both want, and a space where you are not busy taking care of anyone else. Esther offered a really, some wonderful, great tips on how to create an erotic space. So, like texting and emailing each other to create that erotic space, a little bit of flirting online with each other. Nothing about little Johnny's report card or getting the tires changed. None of that nonsense. There's another space for stuff like that, right? We're talking about an erotic space. It's a way of flirting with each other and building the anticipation of physically entering that erotic space when it becomes possible. You kind of always want to have it be at the ready, right? Send him a playful text or, email during the day to start a little erotic thread with each other. None of this is really new information, but I bet a lot of us don't do it. I bet a lot of us have forgotten about these little simple things that we can be doing with our partners. When you get home, you won't have to make such a huge transition. Think about it, from your roles as mother, father, CEO, whatever it is that you do during the day, to lovers, to being in a relationship with each other. Another tip of hers is respecting your partner's otherness, his or her separateness, the stuff that the other person's interested in that you may not be, and vice versa, actually. I mean, I love to run. My husband enjoys the fact that I love to run. He doesn't run. He doesn't know anything about running. He loves photography. I love that he loves photography. I love it when he shows me his photos, but I'm not a photographer and I really don't have any interest in photography, serious photography, I mean. So you kind of have to be respectful of the other. Don't go overboard feigning enthusiasm for the hobbies, but give the person the time and the space to pursue them. And then when individuality and differences are accentuated, you actually see the other person as a separate being from yourself. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was really interesting. Again, last week we talked about how we very often think that our partner or the other person needs to be our everything, that they're an extension of us. And that just isn't true. And it's unfair. And we have to really stop doing that. So let everyone have their own thing, including you. I mean, really what Esther says in summarizing that tip is eroticism requires separateness, and it thrives in that erotic space between you and your partner. Another tip is start to look at the other person, start to look at your partner in a different light, look at them differently. Like when the person's playing a sport or chatting at a party or giving a speech or, wrestling with your kids or caring for your parents or his parents. Look at your partner differently. If it's a man, look at him as a man, not as your husband or the father of your children. Look at him with fresh eyes. If you see that he's attractive to others, you could be more sexually attracted to him too. This creates a sense of risk and mystery and desire, which makes you interested in entering that erotic space. Because again, that's what this is all about. It's creating that erotic space in all of these different ways. And then how do you get into that erotic space? And also another tip that Esther was really, really so clear about, and she sees it a lot, but it's not sexy to have to worry about your partner. And your partner feels the same way. They don't want to worry about you either. The whole damsel in distress thing just doesn't work in the bedroom. Well, you don't have to be a dominatrix, right? I mean, we're not talking about that necessarily, but hey, listen, go for it. And if your partner is needy, it's difficult to let go and have a really, really good time. So think about that. Your partner doesn't want that in you either. And flirt a little bit. Learn how to flirt a little bit. Flirt with your partner and flirt a little bit with others. It just will kind of make you feel sexy. And that's part of entering that erotic space. There's nothing wrong with it. Mild flirting with others can build your sexual confidence and, like I said, make you feel sexy. Flirt for fun, not to make your partner feel jealous. No, 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 no. We're not aiming for that, or insecure. And you need to let your partner flirt a little bit too. Building that erotic space, right? So if you build it, he will come, right? So how do you enter it? We talked a little bit about building it, but how do you actually entering it? It is very interesting. I mean, I just learned so much from this woman. I love her so much. I mean, I could just keep going. Actually, I will keep going. The list of excuses for not having sex is really endless. And saying no can be habit forming. We wanted to know Esther's, I'm saying we because last week I was talking about how a group of us, I invited a few women who were 50 and over to join me when at one of the sessions with Esther. You know, we all learned so much, but we together wanted to know what was Esther's magic formula for poof, getting into the mood, because that really is what is meant by entering the erotic space. It's getting in the mood. Like, how do you get there? If you kind of have been shutting down your erotic self for a while, you know, it's not always easy. We thought, until Esther explained really how easy it can be. She described there were 3 main ways that she told us that were what she calls entry points through which women can get there, to get in the mood, to want to enter that erotic space. So first is arousal. Women are aroused by more things than men, as it turns out. This is based on science and research. So your path to arousal might be fueled by something as simple as a movie, a book, a fantasy, lingerie, or any number of things. When you're aroused and you encounter your partner, one thing can lead to another, right? Arousal leads to desire, and desire leads to sex. And figure out what gets you going and use it when you need it. And then desire is wanting to be turned on. With this entry point, you want to get aroused and you want to actively engage in getting turned on with your partner. Desire can be stoked when you see your partner in a new way. For instance, when you see him dressed up in a new shirt or doing something that he enjoys and is really excited about it. Even when you see him flirting with the bank teller, or whoever, the clerk in the store, you may feel desire for him as a man. You then have to act on that desire by using some of the tools that kickstart your arousal, which will get you to the experience. And to get to the experience, there has to be a willingness, right? The most important entry point for women over 50 may just well be this one, the willingness to be engaged in desire. If you've been ignoring, neglecting, or denying your sexual self for a long time, then you must consciously decide that you want sex in order to even let yourself feel desire. It's that simple. Willingness should never be confused with pity sex. No, 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 no. Or sex you feel you have to do. We talked about that a lot last week. This is not about sex you have to do to, have children, have a baby, or pity sex, like you feel sorry for your partner. No, this is not what we're talking about. Simply acknowledge that you are ready, able, and willing, and let your partner know that he or she has to help a little too. So it's the willingness, it's the being open to the desire. Now listen, there will be days when one entry point works better than another, but what it really all comes down to is this, the willingness to be sexual. You just need to figure out which entry point you're going to use. You may need to nudge yourself sometimes, and that's okay. Listen, we talk ourselves into doing all kinds of things all the time. Going out, attending an event, cooking dinner. But people think we shouldn't have to talk ourselves into having sex, which is ridiculous because talking yourself into sex can actually be a turn on. And we usually end up being happy that we did it, right? That really wowed us and really piqued our interest and also made us a little worried because our marriage is doomed. That's what we were thinking back then when we had this conversation with her. Must we get divorced and move on to a whole new person for excitement? Have we been together too long now? Is it too late? I think is the real question. No, that's not it at all. That's not it, Esther explained. Of course, there will be those of us who do get divorced, okay, or become widowed, okay, yeah, sure, and enter into another committed relationship. But there is an alternative. If you have decided that you are staying with that person, the person you may have been with for 10, 20, 30 or more years, and if this is your partner, by reinventing yourself and your sexual relationship with your partner, you can have, it's like having a whole new marriage with the same person. Think about that. Esther estimates that she's had 3 already with her same partner, 3 marriages. It's lovely. It's a lovely, romantic, and exciting thought. You had the newlywed marriage, and then you had the young parent marriage, and now you can have the older, wiser, a little calmer maybe, marriage, and so on. And if we follow Esther's advice and take our partners along for the ride, we could start over with each other as often as we like. And I think about it, get married to Howard again? I do. And what if you're not married, everyone, right? Like, what if you're single now? What if you're out there thinking about relationships and maybe having an erotic life again with somebody? So married, dating, single, looking, men and women, women and women, men and men, the concept is the same. You've got to make your erotic space together and find those entry points. It's up to you, and it's all about you. So really, our sex lives can be as hot as we want for as long as we want. It is up to us. Engaging in sex is wonderful, but it doesn't always have to be the end result. Remember that. The erotic space can just be a space where you're sexual, where you're feeling sexual, but it doesn't have to end up in intercourse. It can be whatever it is that you want it to be. Keeping in touch with yourself as a sexual being and being intimate with your partner in the erotic space will sustain your erotic life. And that's really the point. People often ask Esther to recommend oil or lotions or bedroom tricks or toys to make their sex lives more interesting. Her response is always the same. Don't even think about new lingerie or some acrobatic position until you've developed your sexual confidence and created an erotic space. Because you'll both end up feeling ridiculous because those things won't allow you to address the underlying issues. Once you've built or rebuilt a solid sexual foundation with your partner, then the real fun can begin because after 50, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Fun and pleasure. And as I said last week, stop being so serious about it. Relax and have a great time. So I really hope you learned something new today and last week too, because again, if you haven't listened to last week, I hope you'll go back and spend a little time with it. And it was really good for me too, because I haven't thought about these things in a while. And I was revisiting some of these ideas right along with you. Everything I learned from Esther, just amazing stuff. It was kind of like a refresher course for me too. So please stay in touch. And remember, if you have ideas for topics you think we should explore, or if there are people you'd like me to invite on the show, email me at grufftalkpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Gruff Talk, please do 2 things. First, share it with all your friends and family, and subscribe to Gruff Talk wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.